Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So, in the ninth juz of the Quran, we have two surahs in the ninth and tenth juz, Surah Al-A'raf and Surah Al-Anfal. And these two surahs, they contain very different themes. But Surah Al-A'raf specifically is the second of two surahs that is focused on what we talked about yesterday, which is Aqidah, right? Islamic theology. It focuses heavily on theology. And Surah Al-Anfal is the first of two consecutive surahs that focus on the military struggles of the Prophet Muhammad and the companions. And so the theme of theology runs through the first half of this juz, of juz number 9, and then there is a shift to the jihad of Rasulullah and his companions, the military struggles of Rasulullah and his companions. However, the shift is not disconnected. When you look at the opening verses of Surah Al-Anfal, it's grounded in Islamic theology. It reminds us that victory is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only. It reminds us that to earn a blessed victory, we must be true believers. And that the necessity for a strong theology is necessary in order for a successful military campaign to happen. So it links these two chapters of the Quran together. And also the juz begins in the middle of a story of Shu'aib alayhi salam, which gives us an example of both types of people. Now Shu'aib's alayhi salam's wealth, he had a lot of wealth, but he was blessed due to his piety. His people were wealthy traders who earned Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's anger due to their cheating of that wealth. And so in the end, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroyed Shu'aib alayhi salam's people, but he was of the righteous, so he was spared and continued to be blessed. And so from Shu'aib alayhi salam's story, we can teach us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's punishment comes, worldly means have no benefit. And so this is why we want to make sure that in our worldly means, it is still going back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And earning is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Earning is a good thing. Earning is beautiful. And earning in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is what should be the priority of every believer. Now, had the people of Madian believed, had the people of Shu'aib alayhi salam believed, they would have experienced more barakah in their wealth. More barakah in the wealth as Shu'aib alayhi salam did. But because they feared that accepting Islam would cause them to lose their wealth. Just like today's society, they fear that if we abandon the interest system, if we abandon the riba system, people are going to lose their wealth. Because it's a fear that they have because they're looking at things from a material perspective. But this story was very relevant to the people of Mecca, who also shared that same fear, because the tribe of Quraysh, they were wealthy traders as well. So Shu'aib alayhi salam's example was really relevant to them. And the wealth of Muslims that were not cheating, nowadays, now we look at it, it's the center of the blessed commerce that we see in Mecca today. And those who were scared of giving up their wealth or scared of being just in their wealth and their transactions and wanted to cheat people so they can gain more wealth, now they're just nameless faces and faceless names that we don't even know anymore. Right? We don't even know who they are. They have no legacy. And they're just decomposed bones under the ground. But the examples of Uthman ibn Affan and so many other companions who were wealthy in their business and their trade, and Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and etc. Now we have their legacy today. Their blessed wealth is what remains today. And so another story in this juz is that the story of Musa alayhi salam and the magicians of Pharaoh. And so when the magicians, they witnessed the miracles of Musa alayhi salam, they immediately believed and gave up everything in this world for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now they were threatened. They were threatened and they were killed by Fir'aun, but they did not waver in their faith. And as believers, we have to know that the true blessings await for us in the afterlife. And so the next surah, Surah Al-Anfal, it shifts back to the Medinan revelation, which was revealed shortly after the Battle of Badr, and it's a reflection on the battle itself. And Surah Al-Anfal is the shortest surah in the Quran after Surah Al-Fatiha in terms of where it's placed. In terms of where it's placed. So we've been going through long surahs, and now Surah Al-Anfal is the shortest from the ones that we have recited so far. And then after that, after Surah Al-Anfal is Surah Al-Tawbah. But because of its relation to each other, and it talks about military struggle, many companions, like the likes of Uthman ibn Affan, when they were compiling the Quran, they actually paired the two together. They considered Surah Al-Tawbah to be an extension of Surah Al-Anfal, right? Because they're really closely related. Now Surah Al-A'raf, in the 7th chapter, it ends with the story of Musa alayhi salam and his followers defeating Fir'aun. And then Surah Al-Anfal, the next surah, was revealed after Rasulullah and his companions defeated the Quraysh at Badr. And so there are many parallels between these stories. The followers of Musa alayhi salam had to flee Egypt, and the companions had to flee Mecca. Fir'aun alayhi salam, Fir'aun alayhi salam, what am I saying? Fir'aun, sometimes you just say things, you know. It's all good. Alayhi salam, radiyallahu anhu. Fir'aun, la'natullah. Sorry, my fault. He was killed in this event. And in Badr, the Fir'aun of our nation, who was killed? Amr ibn Hashim, aka Abu Jahl, aka the father of ignorance, Amr ibn Hisham. And so he was also killed at Badr. And so these stories, they have a lot of parallels. The story of Musa alayhi salam's triumph over Fir'aun, and the story of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his companions' triumph over Abu Jahl. And so this is one of the core themes that we find throughout this juz in the Quran, that there will be triumph of the oppressed over oppressors. And so that gives us hope as we're listening, as we're reflecting, and we're reminded that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give victory. The history repeats itself, and yes, in the fact that oppressors will continue to oppress people, but it also repeats itself in that the oppressed will also be will experience a triumph. So inshallah, that victory is near as well with our Muslim brothers and sisters all over the globe. And so the believers attained victory in battle because they obeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in one of the verses in Surah Al-Anfal, فَلَمْ تَقْتُلُوهُمْ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ قَتَلَهُمْ وَمَا رَمَيْتَ إِذْ رَمَيْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ رَمَى. That it was not you believers who killed them or who was able to be victorious over them, but it was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who did so over the oppressors, over the ones that oppressed the Prophet ﷺ and his companions for years and years and years, and tortured them and killed them. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds the Prophet ﷺ that who threw a handful of sand in the battle of Badr, and it got all in the eyes of the disbelievers. It was a miracle of Rasulullah ﷺ. He said, but it was not you who threw it, Ya Rasulullah. It was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who did so. And they rendered the believers a great favor, and surely Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all hearing and all knowing. And so the Battle of Badr is one of the most significant events in Muslim history. And it's a reminder that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will assist the righteous even if they are few. And it's a reminder that miracles happen when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills them to happen. And it's also a lesson to the tyrants and the oppressors to heed closely and listen closely that your tyranny cannot last forever and it will not last forever. And a day will come where justice will be served. And so this powerful surah covers all these lessons, and it leaves us to contemplate. And then Surah Al-Anfal, in the beginning, it mentions a beautiful aspect of what it means to be a believer. It begins with 5 qualities of a true believer and the rewards of striving to gain these qualities. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ إِذَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهُ وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ وَإِذَا تُلِيَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُهُ زَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا وَعَلَى رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ الَّذِينَ يُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ. That these 5 qualities are what? The qualities are that a true believer, that when they hear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name being mentioned, it causes their heart to shake. They fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then when they listen to the Quran, their faith increases when listening to the Quranic recitation. And their trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they have trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they have firmness, their istiqamah, and they are establishing the 5 times a day prayer. And last but not least, they are generous. The Muslims are generous people. The Muslims are not stingy people. And so some commentators, like in Tafsir Ibn Ashur, for example, they mention that the opposite of these qualities are the qualities of the hypocrites. So this is important. It's a very hopeful ayah for us because hopefully we have these qualities. But if we don't have these qualities, we have to ask ourselves, how do I strive to have these qualities? And so the opposite qualities are what? There's a lack of fear of Allah. There's a lack of fear of Allah. There's a lack of trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're not being moved by the Quran when it's being recited. We're being negligent of our prayers. We're being lazy with our prayers, or we're just using them to show off. And we're also being stingy with our money. And so every believer has to strive to gain the qualities of a true believer while also being mindful to avoid the qualities of the hypocrites. And last but not least, my brothers, we are also reminded in these chapters that life is a test. That we must be ready to handle the trials of life with steadfastness, with patience. We have to be firm in the faith of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have to be firm in His perfect plan. And it's not always easy to do, but it is necessary for passing this test of life and achieving that eternal bliss. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He reminds us in many ayats where He says that whenever we sent a prophet to a society, that the disbelieving people were afflicted with suffering and adversity so that they may be humbled. So that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that when adversity and suffering happens, it's so that we actually turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala changed their adversity into prosperity, they said that, oh, life is just ups and downs. It has nothing to do with rewards and punishment. Life is just ups and downs. And so then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, He sees them. And had the people of those societies been faithful and mindful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we would have overwhelmed them with blessings from the heaven and the earth. لَفَتَحْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ بَرَكَاتٍ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ وَالْأَرْضِ. That we would have given them open many blessings from the heavens and the earth for these people. If they just believed in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if they just stayed faithful to Allah. But because they disbelieved, they were seized. And so the benefits of believing in and obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam is that we gain the tools that are required to pass the tests of life. It's like an open note exam. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the Quran, has given us the guidance of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and now the decision is ours. And the result is that we may experience ease after our hardship, but even if we don't experience it in this world, then it's okay because the eternal ease awaits us in the next. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us paradise. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept. Jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.